At the start of the year, I get this wave of motivation about money. I start thinking about things like paying down debt, building up an emergency fund, and actually planning for the future instead of just hoping it all works out. And for me, I realized I was done with only tracking where my money already went. I wanted a way to plan ahead and feel like I was actually making progress towards real goals. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool designed to make your life easier. It brings your entire financial life, budgeting, accounts and investments, net worth, and future planning together in one dashboard on your phone or laptop. Feel aware and in control of your finances this year and get 50% off your Monarch subscription with code WIFEOFCRIME. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use Wife of Crime at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code WIFEOFCRIME.
Kaylee Cuoco and Sam Claflin star in the MGM Plus original series, Vanished. When the man Alice loves disappears on a train to the south of France, every romantic memory becomes evidence. Every intimate detail, a potential threat. She thought she knew everything about him, but she may not even know his real name. New episode Sunday on MGM Plus. Finding the truth is a dangerous affair.
Hey guys, so as you noticed, this is a bonus episode and a collaboration with another podcast called A Trial by Podcast. 2 weeks ago, we covered the serial killer nurse, Kristen Gilbert, and you guys loved that episode. We got a huge response from it. And that same week, I saw that Kelsey from A Trial by Podcast did an episode on an oncologist named Dr. Fata. Dr. Farid Fata was an oncologist out of Michigan who scammed hundreds of patients with unnecessary chemotherapy treatments. Imagine you undergo chemotherapy because you have cancer, and then later you find out you never had cancer at all. Or that you have a cancer diagnosis, but the treatment you received was way more intense and went on way longer than you actually needed it. Kelsey is the host of A Trial by Podcast, and she deep dived this case. So I listened to the episode. It was so well done. She just included so many details, and her really good friend Maddie, who's a nurse, was on the show with her to offer up a lot of context for people who don't have a lot of medical knowledge. So I thought this episode was so good, and I really wanted to share it with you guys. So this week, we are featuring their episode on our feed, and she is featuring our episode on their feed. I think you guys are really going to enjoy Kelsey's podcast. She has guest hosts on. It's a conversational format like ours. She researches and writes all of her episodes like I do. And as you guys know, I appreciate really good, well-researched storytelling. So when I see other creators do this, I like to shout them out. Kelsey and I both share the common belief that to honor victims and survivors of these insane stories, it's important to learn from these stories. A Trial by Podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday. You can listen wherever you get podcasts. I'm going to include all of her links in the show notes. You can follow Kelsey and A Trial by Podcast on all of the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at A Trial by Podcast. So without further ado, this is the insane case of Dr. Farid Fata.
All episodes of A Trial by Podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only. Much to their parents' dismay, neither host is a lawyer, journalist, or investigator. Just two people with microphones and Wi-Fi. All actions discussed are alleged, and all parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. For the full legal mumbo-jumbo, check the show notes.
Imagine being told you have cancer, a diagnosis that instantly upends your life, and then enduring months or even years of brutal chemotherapy. Now imagine learning that your doctor forced you to undergo 3 to 4 times the standard amount of treatment or kept you on chemotherapy long after you were in remission, all while you believed that you were still fighting for your life. Worst of all, imagine undergoing months or even years of chemotherapy only to later discover that you never had cancer at all and that your doctor knew it the entire time. These nightmares became reality for hundreds of patients in Michigan under the care of Dr. Farid Fata, an oncologist who portrayed the very people who trusted him with their lives. In one of the most egregious cases of medical fraud in U.S. history, Fata subjected healthy patients or those with minor manageable conditions to unnecessary, devastating cancer treatments, all to enrich himself. This is the rise and fall of Dr. Fata. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Kelsey. And in just a couple minutes, you are going to get to the recorded episode that I recorded with a friend of mine named Maddie. But I wanted to cover a couple of quick things before we get into the episode. So I'm kind of recording this little portion after we had already recorded the story for you guys. So number one, I just wanted to give you guys the results of our December fundraising campaign. So for anyone who is new to the podcast, during the month of December in 2025, we covered all stories of domestic violence to raise money for the Sierra Vince Foundation. And this is a DV-focused nonprofit. And of course, it is named after Sierra Vince, whose story we covered, I believe it's episode 86. And so we raised money in a few different ways. I donated half of my podcast ad revenue, half of my TikTok revenue, and 100% of merch profits. And that totaled out to be just under $2,000. So I upped the ante because $2,000 was my goal, and I did a full $2,000 donation. On top of that, our listeners donated a total of $522 directly to the Sierra Vince Foundation. And so in total, we raised $2,522. So I am really excited about that. I know it's not a massive amount of money, but I have never been able to afford to donate thousands of dollars to something that I care about. And so I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for listening in December. Thank you for letting a couple extra ads play through. Thanks for watching TikTok videos. Thanks for making direct donations. And thanks for just listening and supporting every week so I can do very cool things like that. The other thing I wanted to say, just because I've gotten a couple questions, we've gotten some new listeners the last few episodes, is I wanted to give an explanation of the co-host. So today you're going to hear my friend Maddie is on the episode with me. But if you're new to the podcast, I just wanted to give a little bit of an explanation. I used to have a permanent co-host, my friend Emily, who's still my best friend to this day. She decided to leave the podcast around, I think it was episode 80 was her last episode. So if you go back in our catalog, you're going to hear Emily for the first 80 episodes, but she has some career goals that she really needed to spend, time and energy focusing on. So she decided to step back from the podcast. And in the meantime, you are going to hear some guest hosting episodes from some of my friends. They're never the ones telling the story. They're just listening, asking questions that you guys might have, that sort of thing. And I will always be the one hosting the show, telling the story. I do all of the research, and I'm excited to have you guys here. But yeah, there will be different guest hosts pretty much almost every episode for a while until I find a new permanent co-host. So it's been good. I've been getting feedback from you guys on what you like, what you don't like. Just remember, don't say mean things about my friends in the comments, please. I think constructive criticism, totally fine. Just word it nicely. But yeah, hopefully in the next couple months, I'm going to be finding someone to be a permanent co-host. So I appreciate you listening to my couple minute spiel. And now I'm going to go back to the original recording. I hope you are intrigued by this incredibly fucked up story. All right, welcome back to the pod, everybody. I am your host, Kelsey, and today I have a special guest host, Maddie. Say hi, Maddie.
Hi, everybody.
So I'm excited to have Maddie here today because today we are going to be talking about a lot of medical things happening. Not my area of expertise. I actually don't have any area of expertise. I'm an expert in nothing. And Maddie here is a nurse. So I'm hoping that she can kind of help me with some of this, because there are still some like question marks I have in this story, just with someone who's never worked in healthcare, that I don't really know what this means. Now, it is oncology focused, so you might not know every answer, because you're not like an oncology nurse.
I'm not, no. But I'll try my best.
You're going to do better than I will. I'll tell you that. So I'm excited to have Maddie here. One quick order of business. You guys have heard this every week this month already, but I have created a listener survey just to get better information on what you guys want to hear and see in 2026. So I have the link to that in the show notes. It's also in our link tree. So like if you want to come back to it later, go to our Instagram, click the link tree in my bio, and then it'll be on there, the listener survey. If you fill it out before the end of January 2025, you'll be entered into like a giveaway raffle, and I'm going to pick one winner who will get one merch item of your choice and a $50 Amazon e-gift card that I'll send you via email, just to say thank you for taking the time to fill it out, because it's going to be helpful for me so I know what you guys want in 2026. But with that being said, we're going to jump right in.
All right.
So I am telling you the story of Dr. Farid Fata, and he began his medical career with stellar credentials. He was born in Lebanon in 1965, and he emigrated to the United States in the early 1990s after earning his medical degree. Fata completed a residency in New York and a prestigious oncology fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan. And by the way, I heard Memorial Sloan. Have you watched Grey's Anatomy?
Yeah, that's immediately what I thought of.
Okay, I was like, isn't that the name of the hospital after the plane crash?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, but yeah.
What are the odds?
But apparently, this is a very prestigious oncology center. So this is a very impressive point to have on your resume. That's what they're telling me on the online, at least. So by 2003, the ambitious doctor struck out on his own, opening his practice Michigan Hematology Oncology, or MHO is probably what I'm going to call it, because that's a long name. And he opened this in like a suburb of the Detroit area. Over the next decade, his practice expanded rapidly. He established a network of 7 clinics across Metro Detroit, including locations in Rochester Hills, Bloomfield Hills, Clarkston, Sterling Heights, Troy, Lapeer, and Oak Park. These mean nothing to me, but if you live in Michigan, you might live in one of these areas, so I'm listing them anyway. Now, at its peak, Fata's practice was actively treating roughly 1,700 patients at once.
Wow.
Making it one of the largest cancer providers in the state. In total, over the years, MHO treated over 17,000 patients, a patient pool comparable to the oncology practices at the Cleveland Clinic or Cedars-Sinai, both of which had hundreds of doctors on staff, while Dr. Fata's practice only had 1 to 3 doctors at any given time.
Oh my God.
So this is a red flag.
Yeah, big red flag.
Big red flag. But by all outward appearances, Dr. Fata was a highly esteemed oncologist. He became known for an aggressive treatment philosophy that he referred to as the European protocol, which just sounds super fancy and super vague.
Super sketchy, too.
Super sketchy. And apparently, this protocol involved giving higher than normal doses of chemotherapy drugs on a more frequent schedule. Now, to patients and colleagues, this aggressive approach seemed like cutting-edge care from a passionate doctor who wanted to do anything and everything to beat cancer at all costs. So Fata was able to cultivate a reputation as one of the best cancer specialists in the Detroit area. His office complex included its own laboratory, pharmacy, and even a radiation treatment facility, allowing him to keep almost every aspect of a patient's care in-house. By 2009, Fata had become a naturalized U.S. citizen, and his wife Samar served as the chief executive of his growing medical empire. Many of his patients considered him a savior during their darkest hours of illness. Yet, behind the image of the devoted doctor lurked some dark secrets. Unbeknownst to his patients, Dr. Fata's aggressive treatments were not born of medical brilliance or compassion, but really of greed. He was deliberately poisoning people with unnecessary chemotherapy and other infusions, even when they had no cancer at all, in order to fraudulently bill insurance for enormous sums. In the words of one federal prosecutor, quote, Dr. Fata did not care for patients. He exploited them as commodities. He overtreated, undertreated, and outright lied to patients about whether they had cancer so that he could maximize his own profits, end quote. The true scale of his deceit would only come to light years later, totaling approximately $34 million in fraudulent insurance claims and an estimated 553 victims.
Oh my God.
Though the true number of victims is likely much higher. That's just what they were able to prove in court.
Wow.
So we're in for a fucking wild ride. This is one of the most insane stories, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying what he was doing to these people. And I want to kind of start the story by letting you guys know there's a podcast called Dr. Death, and it's more of like an investigative podcast. Like they do a whole season on one story. And they've done like other doctors, but they do a season on Dr. Fata. And that is where I heard this story. So if you guys want to hear more of the story, and trust me, you want to, it is insane. I don't know if it's 6 to 10 episodes or something about this case. The only thing is it's on Wondery. So it is behind a paywall. It's like $6 a month. So I paid for it. I'm giving you the summary here, but really this is just like a long commercial for the Dr. Death. I wish they were paying me for it. They're not. I'm just doing this of my own free will, but it is insane. And like on that podcast, they talk to some of the patients and the families and stuff like that. So it's interesting to hear it in their own words for sure. So yeah. He becomes well known in the area for like, if you need aggressive cancer treatment and you don't have a lot of options, you get referred to Dr. Fata. There are other doctors. That's what's crazy about the story to me. He's not just fooling patients. He's fooling doctors. He's fooling insurance companies. He is fooling all of these people that are supposed to know better. And there's a lot of question marks for me of like how this went under the radar for so long. Because it's not just like, he's doing little things here and there. He is just waving a massive red flag every fucking day through hundreds of patient rooms. Like, it's crazy.
Well, and like Detroit is a big city. You would think there would be plenty of other oncologists in the area. Like, how is he treating this many patients?
And that's the thing is, it really was just, I don't know how you could describe it. Like, it reminds me of like an assembly line.
Yeah.
This person takes you in the room. This person comes in, does this thing. Dr. Fata comes in for 5 minutes. And then you go over to this. And then when you get your prescription, you go to their pharmacy. And it's really just, it is maximized for efficiency and profit. And here's the thing is, if they're really caring about and treating these patients, that's great. You want it to be efficient. You want it to be profitable because we have for-profit healthcare in this country, and that's how it works. But yeah, it's really, I think for you as a nurse, this is going to fucking blow your mind for sure. We're going to start with the story of one patient. Her name was Maggie Dorsey, and she had undergone 7 grueling months of chemotherapy in 2004 for a supposed cancer diagnosis. And because of this, she was suffering debilitating side effects. It left her so weak that she had difficulty walking. At one point, she became so unwell that her loved ones rushed her to the hospital. There, what Maggie told doctors about her cancer and her treatment didn't really add up. So they decided to run some labs because none of this was making sense to the doctors. And I think it's one of those things where the doctors at first are assuming she's just not relaying the information correctly, right? So they run these labs, and this is when she discovered that she didn't have cancer at all. When she learned this, she was obviously fucking floored.
Yeah.
Again, 7 months of grueling chemotherapy. So she learns that she doesn't have cancer at all. And after this, she, of course, files a malpractice lawsuit against Dr. Fata. And they go to court for this, but the lawsuit was quietly settled out of court in 2009.
Of course it was.
So this goes on for over 2 years, right? Now, at the time, this outcome kept the details of what happened here out of the public eye. So it didn't have an impact on Dr. Fata's reputation, and it was just kind of written off by the court system, it seems, as some sort of like accidental misdiagnosis. That's what I assume.
Yeah, because like, how are you just diagnosed with cancer? Like, she had to have had symptoms or like gone to him for a reason, right?
Right. And I think it's one of those things where when it's just one patient, you can say it's very easy to assume like this was not purposeful. This was her labs showed something, or the labs got mixed up, or I don't know how these kind of things can happen.
Or like maybe she just went in for like a routine checkup and then leaves with a cancer diagnosis.
Right. Well, the thing about Dr. Fata's practice is because it's hematology oncology, it sounds like to me, most people are being referred there.
Right.
So like this is not their first stop if they're like feeling unwell. It's like they've gotten some sort of lab work done or blood work done that is concerning, and then they're sent to Dr. Fata. At least for the most part, that's how a lot of these stories start. So I think it's one of those things where there was no criminal red flag here for the court system. This is a civil matter. This doctor, made a misdiagnosis and now he's going to have to pay out. But again, because it was settled out of court, none of this was like public record pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as a result of this unnecessary chemotherapy that she had gone through, Maggie, to this day, continues to suffer from osteoporosis and extremely painful neuropathy. She later told prosecutors, quote, "I'm on a lot of medication, and even with everything I take, it provides me with just enough relief that I don't go insane or cry constantly."
Oh my God.
End quote. And it's one of those things where like her life will never be the same after this. And you can see a video of her talking. I've watched videos on YouTube, and she really you can see how much pain she's in. And it's reading about this was so interesting to me because I always knew chemotherapy really took a toll on your body, but the array of like unique ways that it can do that is really mind blowing to me. And it's so sad. So if anyone out there is dealing with cancer, like has someone in your family dealing with cancer, I'm so sorry because this has opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't know.
Yeah, it's awful.
Now, there's another woman named Patty Hest who was referred to Dr. Fata after her physician found some concerning results in her blood work. So Dr. Fata ran more labs, and he told Patty that the results showed that she had myelodysplastic syndrome, which is a pre-leukemia blood disorder. Does that ring anybody? Did I say that right?
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Dr. Fata told her that it was terminal and that she would need to get a bone marrow biopsy and start chemotherapy right away if she wanted any chance at extending her life. Now, Patty, who had actually worked in hospitals most of her life and actually had a close friend with that same syndrome, the myelodysplastic syndrome, was confused. She didn't understand how he could be so certain that she would have to have chemotherapy.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Because his suspicions haven't even been confirmed by the bone marrow biopsy yet. Still, she trusted Dr. Fata. He was supposed to be the best of the best in the area. And so she went in for the bone marrow biopsy, which he performed on her without any sedative or anesthetic. And
no.
Is that normal?
No, that is such a painful procedure from what I've heard. Like, that is cruel.
Listening to her describe this, it sounded like she had like PTSD.
I'm sure.
It. And so she goes in and she's just confused. She's kind of like waiting for them to give her some sort of just something for the pain. And they don't do anything. And then afterwards, she said that they basically just gaslit her. And they were like, well, most patients don't react the way that you did. Most patients don't have that much pain from it.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, really? Someone drilling in, isn't it? They're drilling into the bone and like taking a piece of the center of your bone out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
I could be wrong, but I thought you were supposed to be like knocked out for that.
I have no idea. I thought you were supposed to get an epidural or something.
Yeah,
like
at
that.
the very least, like a moderate sedation.
I don't know, but this poor woman, like hearing it, you can hear it in her voice still to this day. And this is years and years later. She gets this horrific biopsy. And when the results come back, Dr. Fata tells Patty that his suspicions were correct and that she needed to start chemo the next day if she wanted to extend her life as long as possible. Patty was still skeptical at this point, as her friend, who had the same type of pre-leukemia myelodysplastic syndrome, she was on a wait list for stem cell therapy. And that was supposed to be the first order of treatment before they moved on to chemotherapy, because again, it was pre-leukemia. Mm-hmm. And again, I am not a doctor, so I'm not perfect at explaining this, but this is my understanding of it. And so she's like, why are we skipping this step when for my friend it was different? And so she's becoming really skeptical and she's questioning like Dr. Fata on these things. And he's just telling her, well, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Her doctor's wrong and I'm right, and those sorts of things. But Patty didn't accept this answer. She just felt like something was off. So she insisted that he redo her blood work again before they move forward. Now, Dr. Fata did oblige. And what do you know? 40 minutes later, he comes back with the new results that were miraculously much better than they were the first time.
Oh my God.
He still said that her cancer was terminal, but that they could wait on the chemotherapy for a while and first start with iron infusions and intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG, which, according to the Cleveland Clinic, is, quote, an infusion of immune-supporting antibodies from healthy donors, end quote. We're going to talk a lot about this IVIG, and this is one of the things that he is overprescribing, the iron infusions and the IVIG. So just remember that, because I know it's a lot of terminology, but I'm going to refer to it as IVIG moving forward. So believing that she was dying, Patty kept up with what Dr. Fata was telling her to do. For 2.5 years, she did iron infusions and IVIG treatments on Dr. Fata's orders. And over the years, she just felt more and more confused because her friend that had the same disease was constantly very sick, very ill, struggling to live a normal life, couldn't get out of bed, even before she was diagnosed. And that's what led to her diagnosis. But Patty felt fine. She hadn't really felt sick, except she had some, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of like tired all of the time. That's what led her to get this blood work that had some concerning things that they sent her to Dr. Fata. But like, she was never as sick as her friend was. And even while she's undergoing all these treatments and supposedly dying slowly, she didn't feel that sick. And really the only time she felt really sick was after her treatments. But still, she believed everything Dr. Fata was telling her, and she thought she had very little time left, so she began living like it. She started giving away her possessions. She gave away her cherished wedding ring.
Oh my God.
And she was just preparing for a death that was not actually imminent. She started spending recklessly, paying for all of her family members to take huge vacations together. Like, she was like, this is our last hurrah. I'm going to pay for all of you guys. I think she took them to Disney World. And by the time she realized she was actually not going to die, she was completely fucked financially. And on top of the financial damage, the treatments left her with lasting physical damage. According to Stat News, quote, she suffers from rotting teeth, high blood pressure, and organ damage, end quote. This is another thing I've learned about, like, a lot of these treatments. You're going to hear a lot about people's teeth. And it's crazy how that it can be affected by something that is like going intravenously.
Yeah.
And it's just wild. But you're probably wondering, well, how did Patty discover that she never had cancer, right?
Yeah.
Well, after Dr. Fata's arrest in 2013, she received a letter informing her that all of her treatments had been unnecessary. Like, just a letter in the mail. Just a letter in the mail. Like, hey, we just want to let you know that the 2.5 years of treatment you've been undergoing, you just like didn't need it, and you're not going to die.
Oh my God. I would be raging. How do you even react to that?
I literally don't know. I mean, suing the fuck out of him,
obviously,
for sure. But yeah, the whole thing is insane. So while her false diagnosis had flown under the radar for years, there were major red flags within that time frame. So he's arrested in 2013. Keep that in mind. But we're going to go a little bit back in time. What I'm trying to get across to you guys, so pay attention to this, is there are so many opportunities, red flags where this should have been looked into and stopped leading up to his arrest. So in 2010, 3 years before his arrest, a veteran oncology nurse named Angela Swantek, she interviewed for a job at one of Dr. Fata's infusion clinics. And they had asked Angela to come in and shadow for a day just to see if she liked it there, if it was going to be a good fit before she formally accepted the position. And what she observed during that visit deeply disturbed her. Angela saw chemotherapy being administered in ways that violated basic standards of care. Infusions that would have normally been administered using a needle, which would usually take only minutes, were instead mixed into a bag of fluid and stretched over an hour, making the treatment much more expensive simply because of the extended time. And here's the thing is, Angela was experienced in this type of, she was an oncology nurse.
Yeah.
So she knew what best practice was and, how these medications were supposed to be administered. So not only is this fraudulent in a billing standard, because now you're billing someone for an hour for a treatment that should only take minutes.
Right.
But she had concerns about, well, when you're mixing it with a bag of fluid, is that going to disrupt how the medication is supposed to work? And it's one of those things, well, no one probably knows the answer to that because it's never been tested. Think about not only patients that don't have cancer or they're being overtreated, but think about some of these patients really do have cancer. Some of these patients really are dying.
Right.
And they're not being given these medications properly by him.
Well, and I'm sure some of these patients may not have insurance. So to have to pay out of pocket for that, and now you're increasing the amount of money you have to pay because of the billing and that fraud, that's insane.
It's absolutely insane. And just the disregard for human lives. Remember, 17,000 patients he treated over the years. 17,000. And how many of those people could have lived longer if they had been treated properly? But Angela is seeing this and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And so she starts questioning the other nurses that she's shadowing, like, why are you doing it this way? And they basically just told her, like, oh, that's just how we do it here. That's just how we do it here. It's just Dr. Fata's protocol.
Red flag.
Now, she also questioned them. She's like, well, doesn't diluting the infusion into the fluid, like, doesn't that affect the efficacy of the drug? But like, no one really had an answer. They're like, well, no, it's still like the same amount of medication. And it's like, that's not exactly how medication works all the time. So who knows? But as an experienced cancer nurse, she immediately recognized that something was plain wrong about Dr. Fata's practices. Like I said, she had experience with these drugs, and she knew that what they were doing was incorrect. She also saw medical assistants hanging chemotherapy, which is not legal. It has to be a nurse or a doctor who's doing it. These are just medical assistants hanging the chemotherapy.
That's terrifying.
Now, I have a question. What does hanging chemotherapy mean?
It means like hanging it on an IV pole and running it through the pump.
Okay.
So the bag is like physically hanging there.
Okay.
On the pole.
That's what I thought, but I was like, that's the terminology they use. So I was like, that's what I'm going to say. But yeah, apparently it's illegal for medical assistants to do this because they don't have any sort of like formal education or like degree in anything that, I don't know.
Respect the fuck out of them, but they have no business giving meds, let alone chemo.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Angela's saying to another nurse, like, is that a medical assistant fucking hanging chemotherapy? And again, the nurse just kind of like has no explanation for it. Like Angela's just like, no one has any explanation. And what I don't understand is like, do these nurses not know this?
Right.
Like, I can't imagine that with 1,700 patients, that's like at the pinnacle how many patients they were treating like at once. You know what I mean?
That's
like
crazy.
Active patients. I cannot imagine that none of these nurses had prior experience before coming here. I would get it if like they had an education in nursing but had never worked in, you know, this type of medicine maybe. But I just can't. I think some of these nurses just kept their fucking mouths shut.
Well, yeah, because in most facilities, you have to be certified to even give chemo. And
Really?
like, yeah. So like an RN has to have a special certification to be able to give chemotherapy. Like even when I worked with adults, if we had a patient that was receiving chemo, I was not allowed to physically give it to them because I'm not certified.
Wow.
So I would have to call a chemo nurse to do it.
So that just seals it for me.
Yeah. So the fact that it's like, number one, not even an RN giving it. And number two, there's no way a medical assistant would ever be certified because you have to have a nursing degree. Like that's just, how did those nurses not question that?
And that's the thing is that they knew better, and none of these nurses see any sort of like ramifications from this. Not that I know of, at least. Not in a criminal sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe there are some like lawsuits or anything like that against them, but nothing that I read about. So Angela's fucking shocked. Probably like the way you would be if you were put in there. And she also saw that there were tons of patients coming in for fluids. And so she's kind of questioning this as well. She's like, well, why are there so many people just here for fluids? This is unusual, apparently. And so she's asking about this one specific patient, like, do they have diarrhea? Do they have symptoms of dehydration? Like, why are you giving them fluids? And the nurse told her, no, they have every patient come in the day after their chemo treatment for fluids. And according to Angela, and Maddie can probably tell me if this is correct, it is not standard practice to give patients fluids just for no reason.
No.
You would only do it if there are signs of dehydration, like symptoms of dehydration. So this is just another thing that it is unnecessary treatment. Is it harmful?
It's not harmful per se. I mean, in certain patients it could be, but it's probably just another way for them to bill fraudulently.
Exactly. So Angela literally does about an hour of shadowing. She's supposed to be there for the whole day. And
she's like, fuck this, I'm getting out of here.
Literally, she's like, this is fraud. He's extending treatment times. He's over-treating patients. And she didn't want to take any part in this, so she left.
Good for her.
Now, she didn't just leave and just leave it be, though. She was determined to stop what she perceived as dangerous malpractice. So she reported her concerns to the Michigan authorities in charge of physician licensing and regulation. Now, tragically, her whistleblowing was ignored. So she files this in 2010, this complaint, telling them everything she saw, with someone who knows what they're talking about is telling the board this. And she waits and waits and waits for a response. And it wasn't until a year later, in 2011, when she finally received a formal letter from the state of Michigan's Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs stating that officials found no evidence to justify an investigation into Dr. Fata. Disheartened, Angela could do nothing further at the time. And this failure of oversight, to me, basically just, this was like a green light for him to just keep going.
Yeah.
Remember, like we were talking about Patty, who didn't know until 2013 that she didn't have cancer, that this was all made up, that she's being treated for no reason. And 3 years earlier, someone was telling the board that this was happening, and they didn't even investigate it.
And like, why did it take that long for it to then get...
And they didn't even like call her in for any sort of like interview or questioning of like, okay, tell us more about this. What did you see? Who was doing it? Like nothing like that. They just responded to her letter a year later and did nothing about it. So at this point, she didn't know what else she could do. There really wasn't anything else she could do. And years later, reflecting on how the system failed, one observer noted that in private practice, quote, doctors have little to no oversight. Fata would provide the chemotherapy in his office, so it was even more unlikely that he would be caught, end quote. So he is doing things to like actively cover this up. But again, why is Angela the only one reporting this to somebody?
Yeah.
Now, on top of this, on top of administering the chemo in his office, he's also keeping tight control of all of his self-run clinics. Because remember, I think it's seven different locations. And he created this well-built system to avoid scrutiny by outside parties. So they're all of these different things I'm going to talk about, they're sources of revenue, but they're also ways to avoid oversight. So he created his own pharmacy to avoid questions about overprescribing any drugs. And then, of course, he's also like bringing in revenue with that pharmacy. And any patient who saw him was only allowed to get their medication from his pharmacy, whether or not it was in network for them. This was just one of those things. It's like, hey, if you want to see the best of the best, you have to do my protocol and you have to go to my pharmacy and you are rewarded with, I'm going to save your life.
Oh my God. Huge red flag.
And these factors just kind of allowed this like perfect network of fraud that he had created that is going unchecked by any outside parties, because I think pharmacists are probably trained in, you know, what appropriate dosages and things like that are for these types of patients. And he's like, well, if I'm paying the pharmacist, then what are they going to do?
It's also crazy because like, at least in Cleveland, like, you know, we have the 3 big hospitals. So we're so used to like all of your care, whether it's like primary care or oncology or any specialty, usually goes through one of the hospital systems. So for him to have his own practice of this many facilities of cancer care, it's so weird to think about that it's not affiliated with a hospital and that there's no one like checking him and like there's no checks and balances in his practice because it's just him.
And it's also a question mark for me. How are they not flagging that they don't have enough doctors to be treating that many patients? Like at the most, he had 3 doctors working underneath him.
Like,
that's insane. To be treating 1,700 patients at a given time is crazy. Now, the tipping point for all of this came in 2013 when Dr. Fata's web of deceit finally began to unravel from within. So in June of that year, a 54-year-old patient named Monica Flagg walked into Fata's clinic and received a life-changing diagnosis. She had multiple myeloma, a serious blood cancer, and Dr. Fata told Flagg that without immediate and lifelong chemotherapy, she had little chance of survival. Basically, we're going to keep the chemo going to keep you alive, and if you stop it, you're going to die.
Makes no sense.
That's the way it sounds to me like that's what he's telling these patients. And so he promptly started her on an aggressive chemo regimen. On July 1st, 2013, after just her first round of treatment, Monica suffered a severe injury. Her leg inexplicably shattered in 2 places. And I say inexplicably, but I think it was like a very mild fall of some sort, just like at her house, like just the kind of thing where you expect just bruises.
Yeah, shouldn't have caused that shattering.
Yes, shattering. And so she's hospitalized because of this shattering of the leg. And because Dr. Fata happened to be out of the country on vacation, there was another doctor from Fata's practice who took over her care at the hospital. And this is Dr. Mongley, who was a younger oncologist working under Fata. And so he goes to the hospital to review what's going on with her, look at her charts, look at her test results. And what he saw stunned him. Flag's lab numbers and clinical condition did not match someone with active multiple myeloma at all. So Dr. Mongley is coming in and he's like, what the fuck is going on here? This is one thing where Dr. Mongley, at least, it seems like he was working under Dr. Fata for a while and he seemed to not know about what was going on because he's a good guy in this story, Dr. Mongley.
Okay.
Like, he is one of the reasons that this all came to light. But it does make you question, okay, like, if he could fool some of these doctors for a while, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe he could fool the nurses too, but it's like they should know it's not standard practice. I don't know. So as Dr. Mongley later put it, he could tell, quote, just by looking at the chart, end quote, that her results were essentially normal for a woman her age, and there was no indication of the cancer that Dr. Fata had diagnosed for her. Now, I want to be very clear because I'm going to keep talking about Dr. Mongley. But what I am telling you about Dr. Mongley does not come from him. It comes from other people talking about what Dr. Mongley said about his experience here.
Okay.
So this is really hearsay. And I know that there are some things that Mongley has like denied some of these details, saying that that's not what happened, or it's not what he said, or it's not what he heard, whatever. I don't know exactly like what those details are, but I just want to be clear that this is mostly what other people allege happened. So it might not be complete fact, but to me, it kind of sounds like it's more one of those things where the overall gist of the story is the same from everybody. It's like the details of like when he found out certain things, stuff like that. So I just don't want to accuse Dr. Mongley of anything that he didn't do. You know what I mean? But from what I've read, it sounds like he did not commit any crimes here. He wasn't participating in or complicit in what Dr. Fata was doing. And like I said, he kind of helps bring this all to light. So after seeing these charts, he immediately grows suspicious that Flag might have been misdiagnosed or potentially given unnecessary toxic treatments. So the very next day, he went to Dr. Fata's clinic and he pulled Monica Flag's records for a closer review. And these records just confirmed his fears. There was nothing in her medical file that provided any justification at all for chemotherapy.
Oh my God.
So this was not like a misdiagnosis. This wasn't, oh, her labs showed something funky and he just made an assumption. It all looked normal from her records, okay?
Oh my God.
So in his expert opinion, not only did she not have cancer, she never had cancer. So it's not just like, oh, she had it, the treatment was helping and she got better and he was continuing to treat her. She never fucking had cancer.
Oh my God.
And he's telling her she's going to die unless she does lifelong chemotherapy.
That is insane.
It's insane.
Like lifelong? No.
This is like pure evil. This is pure evil. Like, I can't even, I don't know. This is like, are you possessed by a fucking demon? Like, it's insane. So one aspect of multiple myeloma is that it can begin with very subtle changes in blood chemistry, which could be easily misrepresented by an unethical physician like Fata. So Mongley realized that Fata could exploit such minor irregularities to falsely label someone as having cancer, administer chemotherapy, and then later claim that the patient was in remission, when in fact, they were never ill to begin with. So this is just, what he's doing is just bolstering his own reputation, because he's like, I have this really aggressive protocol, and if you follow it, I'm saving lives. And look at, I have, and these are made up numbers I'm giving you right now, but let's say I have 1,000 patients and 900 of them survived past their initial diagnosis because of my treatment. But it's because half of them didn't fucking have cancer or whatever it may be. So Dr. Mongley knew that he had to act quickly. He found Monica Flagg in her hospital room on July 2nd, and he gently delivered the astonishing news that she did not have cancer and she never did. He explained that she should obtain her records immediately, get a second opinion, and under no circumstances should she continue treatment with Dr. Fata. Now, Monica was obviously incredulous. She felt like Dr. Mongley had saved her life, but she also felt like she was basically the victim of an attempted murderer, pretty much. And as for Mongley, this discovery weighed heavily on his conscience. He had already been planning to leave Dr. Fata's practice at the end of the summer after clashing with Dr. Fata over some ethical issues. This is where we get into the he said, she said part of it all. But my understanding is that Mongley had caught Fata lying about the clinic's quality control credentials, which was one of the reasons that he had decided to resign. Now, the he said, she said of it all is that he was starting to see some of the unethical, over-treatment of patients. But Dr. Mongley says that this was the first big red flag. So that's kind of where we see a differentiation. Now, at this point, having seen with his own eyes that this perfectly healthy woman had been poisoned with chemotherapy, Dr. Mongley felt compelled to take action against his employer. So, over the next few weeks in July of 2013, Mongley conducted a quiet search through patient records at MHO to see if Monica Flagg's case was an anomaly or if it was part of a larger pattern. And sadly, it was, of course, the latter. He discovered numerous instances of treatments that made no medical sense. For example, IVIG, which again is an expensive therapy meant for patients with certain immune disorders, was being given to many of Fata's patients who had no condition justifying its use. So it appeared that he had been administering these high doses of IVIG as another money-making scheme. So Dr. Mongley has now confirmed that this isn't just one-off. This is what he is doing. And so he is kind of gathering information on the low. He's like an undercover agent right now, which is awesome.
Well, Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. So he's convinced that Dr. Fata was perpetrating systemic fraud and abuse. So he confided in a trusted oncology nurse and in a nurse practitioner at the clinic about what he had found. Together, they confronted Dr. Fata, questioning his heavy use of IVIG on patients who didn't need it. And this, of course, is a tense meeting. Dr. Fata's reaction spoke volumes because instead of offering them some sort of medical explanation for why he was giving these patients the IVIG, he just hastily agreed to curb the use of IVIG at the clinic. And he's like, okay, I'll do less. I'll prescribe less of it, I guess. And to Mongley, this was essentially an admission of guilt. He later said, quote, an honest doctor would never cut back on his own protocol solely because of staff and physician objections, end quote.
Yeah, you should be able to back up your reasoning.
Right. And a lot of the things you hear over and over again is whenever he was questioned about certain things, it's the European protocol. It's an aggressive protocol. That's what it is. And this is a different type of treatment protocol than what most doctors give. Now, while this internal confrontation temporarily reduced one abusive practice, Dr. Mongley understood that a single example like Monica Flagg's might not be enough for outsiders to shut Fata down. Because again, you can try and explain this away as some sort of human error, some sort of mistake. He needed more evidence and likely the involvement of law enforcement to truly stop this doctor from harming additional patients. Fortunately, there was another ally already in place, ready to join forces in exposing Dr. Fata's crimes. So within the administrative ranks of MHO, there is a man named George Karadesh, and he was actually the office manager who had joined the practice in 2011. Now, George initially saw MHO as a great career opportunity for him. It was a fast-growing practice with a respected name. He had experience in these types of roles, but this was a huge clinic system, and they were paying him over six figures, which is a lot for someone in this type of position, according to George. Now, by mid-2013, he couldn't ignore that something strange was happening in the clinics around him. There was a lot of staff turnover. It was unusually high. Within 2 years, one of MHO's other oncologists, Dr. Mongley, and two nurse practitioners abruptly gave their notice and prepared to leave. And this was for 3 people to be leaving all at once and making like an abrupt leave like that was unusual.
Yeah, there's something going on.
Now, sensing that these departures might be more than routine job changes, George directly asked Dr. Mongley why he was leaving. And the answer he received was a bombshell that confirmed his worst fears. According to George, Mongley told him, quote, patients were given chemotherapy and other treatments when they didn't have cancer, end quote. Now, from what I've read, it sounds like this is one thing that Dr. Mongley denies saying this. He claims that he suspected fraudulent practices and the overuse of IVIG, but that he did not know or have any proof that Dr. Fata was doing the same with chemotherapy.
Okay.
Because obviously the chemotherapy is a lot more toxic for people. It's going to have way harsher consequences. So that's kind of one of the differentiations in their stories. Now, at first, George struggled to believe that such a heinous betrayal could be true. Dr. Fata had a stellar reputation. How could he possibly be deliberately giving chemo to people who weren't even sick? But the longer that George pondered it, the more the pieces fell into place. He recalled that several clinical staff members had quietly voiced discomfort about Fata's unusually aggressive treatment protocols, which he referred to as the European protocol. Many had whispered concerns that Fata pushed far more chemotherapy than other doctors. And now, with Mongley's testimony, it seemed to all make sense. So George was determined to verify the claims himself. And I don't remember if I mentioned this later in the script, so sorry if I repeat it, but George had actually been a whistleblower at another medical practice, and I'm not going to go into the details, but basically it was like fraudulent billing. So I believe it was a sleep clinic. And so normally you would bill someone for like a sleep study, but it has all of these different parts to it that are part of like a bundle almost. And that is cheaper. But what they were doing is instead of bundling it under a sleep study, they were billing them all separately, which made it a lot more expensive. And he had actually been the one to like blow the whistle on this and got that clinic shut down and everything.
Wow.
So now when he's seeing, this stuff going on again, he's fucking ready to roll.
Yeah, he's like, what the fuck?
Been here, done this. They've been waiting for me to shut this shit down. And so he's determined to get to the bottom of this. So he undertakes his own covert investigation within the clinic. Because again, Dr. Mongley and the nurse practitioner and the nurse, they all left. And he is like, no, we have to stop this. So he speaks to nurses and he starts reviewing internal data. One glaring statistic jumped out. Dr. Fata's treatment to consultation ratio, which was essentially the proportion of patients that he treated versus those he only evaluated, was drastically higher than other oncologists. According to George, at the other places he worked, if a doctor saw maybe like 10 patients, maybe 2 or 3 of those would end up receiving treatment. But at MHO, it was more like 8 or 9.
Oh my God.
He was treating 80 to 90%. Again, this is according to George. I don't know that this was necessarily confirmed statistically by the records. I'm not sure. But in other words, almost everyone who walked into Dr. Fata's door ended up receiving extensive treatments, which was extremely abnormal in George's experience. Now, George also honed in on the suspicious use of IVIG because Dr. Mongley had mentioned it. Meanwhile, a third employee was becoming suspicious of Dr. Fata, one of the nurses. This nurse is named Mary Sutherland. And in her past experience, she had never seen a single doctor treating so many patients. At first, she just felt like the quality of care was extremely low. Like that was her main concern because Dr. Fata is only coming in, spending a few minutes with each patient. And it's just like a factory farm that's happening here. And that was her concern, was that they just weren't getting good quality care.
Yeah.
But over time, she began to notice that the doses of chemo that Fata was ordering were way higher than what she was used to. When she questioned Dr. Fata on this, of course, the answer was it's the European protocol. It's an aggressive protocol. So when George learned that Mary was also questioning Dr. Fata's care, he asked her to audit all of the recent IVIG treatments. And what she found was staggering. In 1 week, 38 out of 40 patients who received IVIG under Dr. Fata did not medically need it or even qualify for the drug.
My God.
So almost all of the patients they had treated with it that week, there was no reason. It was completely unnecessary for them to have this treatment. Now, this nurse passed this information to Dr. Mongley, who passed it to George as further proof during his investigation. Because this is one of those things where, like, George normally wouldn't have access to this information or even know how to evaluate it. So it's like they're all working together on this whole thing. So Mary and Mongley, like I said earlier, they had confronted Dr. Fata about this. And that's when he agreed to reduce all of those IVIG treatments. Okay. So sorry, the timeline is like hard here with all the different POVs. I'm trying to like line it up. Let me know if you get confused. So with all of that hard data in hand and multiple staff testimonies, George realized that he had enough evidence to take to the authorities. He also understood the personal stakes, later saying, quote, "My job was at stake, my livelihood, even my own personal safety," end quote. But his conscience would not allow him to stay silent. He later told CBS News, quote, "I wasn't looking at the patients anymore as being treated. I looked at it as a burning building with people inside. I had to make it stop, and I had to make it stop quickly," end quote. And snaps for George.
Yeah.
We love George. Huzzah to George. So George contacts an attorney that he knew, David Herron, who specialized in whistleblower cases. And of course, George knew David Herron because George had been that whistleblower before for the sleep clinic. So he had worked together before. So he's like, I got a guy. Let me call my whistleblowing guy, my whistleblower attorney. And so together, they decided to file a lawsuit under the Federal False Claims Act, which would allow George to act as a whistleblower on behalf of the government and potentially collect a reward for exposing fraud. More urgently, Herron directly alerted the U.S. Department of Justice to intervene immediately, given the ongoing danger to patients.
Damn.
So at this point, he is like officially like an inside, he's like undercover spy at this point. Now, the response from federal law enforcement was swift this time. Thank fucking God. Why it wasn't the first time, who knows? But on August 5th, 2013, George filed his sealed whistleblower lawsuit against Dr. Fata, MHO, and all of their related entities like the pharmacy. They also had a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, and it was supposed to be like helping the patients. And it was like a massage therapy clinic. But then they were sending patients there. They were like, "Oh, you're not feeling well. You should go to our massage therapy clinic. It's run by our nonprofit." But then they would get massages. And then as they're leaving, they'd be like, "And that's going to be this much." Oh, my
God.
So the people were confused. Like, if the nonprofit isn't to help the cancer patients, who the fuck is it for?
Right.
And none of that has been like clearly answered where that money was going.
Yeah.
The next day, after they filed this lawsuit, so this is August 6th, 2013, agents from the FBI showed up and arrested Dr. Fata at his clinic on charges of healthcare fraud. And in the span of just a few days, that burning building that had been Dr. Fata's practice was finally extinguished before it could claim more victims. And this is one of those things where, like, they didn't have any actual evidence besides what George was saying, it sounds like. But it was because so many people were in danger that they were able to still make this arrest anyway. And thank God that they did.
Yeah.
So this is when, you know, the first patient that I was telling you about, Maggie Dorsey, she gets that like letter in the mail, like, by the way, you don't have cancer. And yeah, a letter in the mail is fucking crazy.
Imagine if it got lost in the mail.
In August 2013, the focus shifted to unraveling the full scope of his crimes and securing justice for the hundreds of people affected. Investigators from the FBI, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, which is, if you guys aren't from the US, it's like our tax collectors, evil people. And they all joined forces. They're not evil in this case. This time they're doing good. And they pore over the records that were seized from Fata's offices. What they found confirmed that Dr. Fata's fraud was vast and heinous. Over a period of at least 6 years, from about 2007 to 2013, Dr. Fata bullied or deceived 553 people into receiving unnecessary cancer treatments.
Oh my God.
And what I want to stress to you guys is these are the cases that they could prove using those medical records. So I would imagine that it is a lot more than 553 people.
Yeah.
Think about the people who actually had cancer and who like were treated until the very end.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of these stories where there were people who there was nothing that could be done for them. Their lives were not going to be extended by this. And instead of letting them live their final, few weeks or months in peace, he was treating them with chemotherapy until they died.
Oh my God.
Which is horrific.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you guys, listen to pay the $6 if you can spare a few bucks and listen to this season of Dr. Death. Hearing these families talk about this is like, it's guttural because they lost the last few months that they could have had with their loved one.
Yeah, because chemo is not easy on the body.
No. And not only the patients, but I've been hearing a lot lately about like a term that I feel like I don't hear a ton in true crime is co-victims and like the web of co-victims because this doesn't just affect the patient. It affects their whole family, mentally, financially, like taking care of this person, all of these things. And you have those co-victims. But then let's say it's your mother who has cancer. So it affects you, your co-victim. But it also then affects your spouse because of what you're going through. Yeah. And then when it affects your spouse, it affects your spouse's mom because their mom's worried about them. And it's this web that just grows bigger and bigger.
I can say from experience, you know, my dad has cancer now and it affects the whole family. Thankfully, he's okay. He's doing great. But
I didn't know that your dad had cancer. I'm sorry that maybe this wasn't the best story to pick.
No, not at all. Not at all. But yeah, it affects the whole family. Like, and you don't think about that when you're the physician prescribing the medication or like how it's going to take a toll on the patient's mental health. And like to have someone experience that in their last days on earth, how horrific.
Yeah, absolutely horrific. Your dad's doing well though?
Yeah, he's doing great. He's doing much better. So
good. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. So it's estimated that Dr. Fata submitted approximately $34 million in false claims to Medicare and private insurers for those unwarranted procedures. This made Dr. Fata one of the worst medical fraudsters on record in human history. And prosecutors later branded him, quote, the most egregious fraudster in the history of this country, end quote, in terms of healthcare fraud. And the fraudulent practices were extensive. In his own guilty plea later, Dr. Fata admitted to a litany of unethical acts, including administering toxic chemotherapy and other cancer drugs to patients who did not need them, often based on false diagnoses, giving patients IVIG infusions that were medically unnecessary purely to inflate billing, ordering a barrage of unnecessary diagnostic tests such as expensive PET scans to generate more insurance claims. But this is like, you know how I was talking about how he had his pharmacy and all of this? What I had read is that most oncology clinics, they will send PET scans or like, what are the other big body scans that they do?
MRI,
like MRIs, things like that. Like these really expensive diagnostic equipment, they would actually send their patients to hospitals to do that. They wouldn't have them in-house. But this is one of those things that over the years, he brought in-house because you know, if it's done at a hospital, the results are on record at the hospitals. That's another way he was making money, is giving them these unnecessary tests when he already knew that they didn't have cancer. Like there were no signs that warranted these tests.
It's also crazy that like insurance didn't flag this, because I feel like insurance companies are down your throat about what they're going to cover and what they're not going to cover. How did they approve all this?
That's
Maybe they
what
didn't,
I'm fucking saying.
How did they not catch on?
I don't know. Is it just that the insurance companies love expensive cancer treatment because that like they hike up premiums for? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. It's insane.
Yeah.
So he also admitted in the guilty plea to falsely diagnosing patients with cancer or other serious conditions that they did not have. Because again, a lot of his work is oncology, but it's also hematology, so other blood disorders and issues with your blood. He was over-treating end-of-life patients who did truly have cancer, but he just was effectively torturing them with needless chemotherapy up until their dying days when the treatment had no benefit for them. He was accepting kickbacks from at least 2 hospice and home healthcare agencies, so Guardian Angel Hospice and Guardian Angel Home Healthcare. So what a kickback means is they are paying him to refer patients to them. So every patient that he sends to them, he gets a kickback of money from them, you know, a portion, maybe a percentage of like what they spend with those companies. This is illegal. This is not just fraud in a monetary sense. Like this is illegal. And these two home healthcare, or the hospice and home healthcare agency, they do get investigated because of this as well. Because it's not just illegal on Dr. Fata's part, it's illegal on their part as well. He also pled guilty to laundering money from his healthcare fraud and using it to expand his operations. So, for instance, he was funneling profits from the chemo scheme into his own diagnostic testing facility and just to perpetrate further medical fraud. So all of this extra money that he's making, that's how he's paying for a pharmacy and all of this equipment. And really, through this investigation, the portrait that emerged was of a man who had utterly betrayed his medical oath. As one federal agent described, Dr. Fata, quote, falsely diagnosed his patients with cancer and administered toxic chemotherapy with potentially harmful and even deadly side effects, end quote. And he had done this all for greed. He had done this all for money. An email uncovered during the investigation illustrated Dr. Fata's mindset in his own words. In the email, he complained about a patient with an outstanding balance, writing, quote, I am concerned. How come this patient had a balance of $51,000 since 2011, end quote. He then signed the message, quote, I need my money, exclamation point,
God.
Dr. Fata, end quote.
What a piece of shit.
I need my $51,000. And it's like, did this patient even have cancer? Who knows?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Now, the human cost of Dr. Fata's fraud was almost unfathomable. So we can tell you he committed, there's $34 million of fraudulent claims, but people weren't just defrauded financially.
Mm-hmm.
Their bodies and their spirits were wrecked by him. Investigators later tallied that Fata had administered over 9,000 unnecessary infusions or injections to patients, exposing them to severe health risks and side effects for no reason. Some of Dr. Fata's patients did have cancers, but like I said, he's overtreating them and he is hastening their deaths and destroying any quality of life that they have in their final weeks. Nurses and social workers reported that Dr. Fata would even lie about prognoses, telling terminal patients that they had a 70% chance of beating cancer if they followed his European protocol.
Oh my God.
When in reality, their odds were incredibly slim. So he's giving them false hope to keep them on the chemotherapy to get money out of them.
That is so sickening.
Sickening. As U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid later summarized, quote, he exploited patients as commodities. He overtreated, undertreated, and outright lied so that he could maximize his own profits, end quote. Once Fata was arrested and his clinics closed, an urgent priority was to help his hundreds of patients, many in the middle of treatment plans, not knowing whether or not they really had cancer or if they were just destroying their bodies for no reason. Federal agents and prosecutors worked around the clock to ensure that all of Fata's patients received their medical records and were quickly transitioned to new doctors. Major medical centers in Southeast Michigan opened their doors to see former Fata patients right away, understanding the critical need for trustworthy care. For some, the transition came too late. They had already been subjected to irreversible damage. Meanwhile, Fata himself, he's behind bars. He's not getting out while he's awaiting trial. So initially, a judge had set his bail at $170,000, but this guy is raking in millions of dollars every year. So prosecutors quickly moved to have it raised when they discovered that he not only had access to all of this money, but overall he posed a flight risk. He wasn't from the U.S. He had family outside of the U.S., all of these things. So investigators identified at least $9 million in assets that had not yet been seized. Much of it was liquid and potentially easy for Fata to use to flee the country. Like, I mean, you can just get a private jet and just go overseas, go to his family in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So agreeing that he might abscond, Judge Sean Cox upped the bond to $9 million and confined Fata to jail rather than allowing house arrest. And huzzah to that judge. So he has been in custody since the day of his arrest, pretty much.
Okay.
Now, facing the mountain of evidence and the likelihood of never seeing freedom again if convicted at trial, Dr. Fata chose to plead guilty before his case went to a jury. So on September 20th, 2014, in a federal courtroom in Detroit, Fata formally admitted to his crimes. That whole list I gave you is what he admitted to. So he pled guilty to 13 counts of healthcare fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to pay or receive kickbacks, and 2 counts of money laundering. And I'm like, why is it only 13 counts of healthcare fraud? I don't know, if it was just part of the plea deal, because that was going to give him the same amount of time no matter how many times he did it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But importantly, the plea deal did not include any agreement on his sentencing. So it's not like, hey, if you plead guilty, you're only going to serve 20 years. It was like,
that's good.
Plead guilty and avoid going to trial.
Yeah.
Because they had everything they needed to convict him at trial if they needed. So they weren't bargaining with him. Now, with that, the government was free to argue for the maximum punishment, and they fully intended to. Now, even in a country like the U.S., sadly accustomed to healthcare fraud, Fata's case stood out as uniquely horrific. Prosecutors announced that they would seek a life sentence for him, effectively 175 years for Dr. Fata despite his guilty plea. And I just want to say, fuck yeah. That's the kind of prison sentence I like to hear is a 100 years for something. That's what I like to hear.
Yes.
So Assistant Attorney General Leslie Caldwell said, quote, time and time again, rather than use his medical degree to save lives, Dr. Fata instead destroyed them in pursuit of profit, end quote. I'm like, these are the same quotes over and over, just different people, but like, it's just fucking insane what he was doing. So his sentencing hearing began in early July 2015, providing a dramatic and heart-wrenching end to this saga. So according to CBS News, quote, expert witnesses took the stand to describe the overuse of chemotherapy. One drug, rituximab, is typically given 8 times for aggressive lymphoma. But Dr. Fata prescribed it to one patient 94 times.
Oh my God.
So they're like basically taking all of these medical records and they're having real oncologists look over all of these records, like what is typical, what should be done. And
Dr.
Mongley.
Did he have to follow this European protocol too? Like, how did he not? I know you said people are wondering how did he not come forward earlier, but how did he not question all of these like excessive use of the chemo?
I believe, my understanding is that for his patients, he would do things his own way.
Okay, so he was separate from...
It's not like Dr. Fata is calling the shots and then he's following through. It's for his patients, he's calling the shots for his patients.
Okay.
But Dr. Fata was the owner of this, so that's why they say he worked underneath Dr. Fata.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it. But it is, I think I have a lot of questions about this staff.
It's crazy that it took that long for him to notice anything. Like, this dude must have been really good at hiding his fraud.
Yeah.
From his colleagues.
I think he was. I don't know. But it is just how egregious it is. It's not like, again, this one drug. Normally, they would give it about 8 times for aggressive lymphoma. And he's prescribed it to one patient 94 times. So it's not like he's giving it to them 10 times instead or even doubling it.
Like, damn, dude, you're ballsy. 94 times.
And here's the thing is, are the nurses not getting this? Or the pharmacists, how are they not catching this? The office staff who's billing this, obviously, they probably just don't know if they've never worked in oncology before, but it's just 94 times. How do you not fucking catch that? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So over several days during this whole, so it's not a trial, but it's his sentencing hearing, but they're still presenting all of this information before the judge in order for him to make a decision on the sentencing. So over several days, dozens of his former patients and their family members stood before the court to give victim impact statements, painting a devastating picture of what his lies had cost them. Men and women, young and old, described ruined health, lost years, and irreparable losses. Many spoke directly to Fata, who was in the courtroom, describing the pain he caused. One after another, the stories unfolded. So I'm going to summarize some of these stories for you. So there is a man named Robert, and he was relatively young, and he was falsely told that he had a rare blood cancer. He underwent 2.5 years of chemotherapy under Dr. Fata's care when he did not have cancer. He told the court, quote, "I'd become weak, sick to my stomach, tired all the time," end quote. The excessive chemo caused most of his teeth to rot and fall out.
Oh, my God.
Leaving him with only 2 teeth remaining in his mouth. Again, this is a young, healthy man.
This poor guy.
Even years later, he still suffered neurological damage. He would twitch uncontrollably as a lasting effect of the unnecessary toxic chemo. He told the court how he discovered the truth by seeking a second opinion. He said, quote, "I was shocked. It was worse than hearing that I had cancer," end quote. That is, I can't even imagine.
No, there's no words.
It's like a unique form of psychological torture.
Yes. And physical torture. You're being poisoned.
And I can't imagine the distrust that this causes for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And now it's when you have all these lasting issues, you probably are seeking medical care continuously.
Yeah.
He now faces life with dentures as, a relatively young guy for having dentures.
Oh my God.
And he just has all of these health problems that he never should have had at all because he trusted Dr. Fata's impeccable reputation.
Not that this makes it any better, but I hope these victims got a payout.
We're going to talk about the payout. It's always not enough.
Yeah,
That's always my opinion. Not enough.
Yeah.
Patty Hester, whose story I already told you before, she also spoke at the sentencing. There was another patient who was identified in court only as CC, like their initials, but they didn't want their name out in the public. But she recounted how she was giving an astonishing 177 chemotherapy treatments.
Oh my God.
And I don't know how many, like, obviously, again, guys, I'm not in the medical field. To my understanding, you do cycles of chemotherapy. Like, you might do maybe 8 to 15 treatments for a few weeks and then see how you do.
And a lot of times you do it, like, you'll get an infusion and then you'll have 2 weeks off or something like that. Like, you have a break in between treatments. So to have that many of that had to be years.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And because of this was basically just toxic overload that ravaged her body. She ended up with severe bladder, bowel, and kidney damage to the point that she, quote, could no longer perform basic tasks, end quote, like for herself. She needed care from others. And her life was irrevocably changed by the medical abuse. This is someone, again, she did not need all of this.
Yeah.
And now she has to have, she cannot care for herself. She has to have a caretaker. It's destroying people's bodies.
Yeah.
Now, families of deceased patients also spoke out. There was a woman named Sydney who told the story of her mother, Helen, who was 87 and actually had a treatable form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, under Dr. Fata's care, however, Helen was subject to an onslaught of treatments that made her decline far more swiftly than she should have. Sydney later stated, quote, he killed my mom. She had a very treatable disease. By the time he got done with her, she was taking 16 meds, end quote.
Oh my God.
Helen passed away in 2011, and her daughter firmly believes that Fata's aggressive and unnecessary interventions hastened her death. And you have to think, she was 87 years old. Her body cannot take this type of thing, even without cancer.
Yeah.
But again, she did actually have lymphoma.
Oh.
Now, there was a woman named Ellen who spoke about her father, John, who did have stage 4 cancer when he became Dr. Fata's patient. Instead of helping, Fata acted as a fearmonger, insisting that her elderly father kept taking more and more rounds of toxic chemo, even as it made him horribly ill. She later said, quote, my dad could have had much better life quality those last couple of years, end quote, expressing grief that Fata had robbed her father of a peaceful end of life. Now, John died in 2012, and again, his daughter is convinced that he suffered needlessly in his final days under Fata's orders.
Yeah.
These testimonies and many others painted Dr. Fata as not as a healer, but as a callous villain. In a particularly emotional moment, one victim's wife, Geraldine Parkin, addressed Fata's later attempts to minimize his wrongdoing, saying, quote, just to hear that he will not say, I'm guilty, extends the suffering for everyone involved. It seems like we're being victimized over and over and over, end quote. After days of listening to these horror stories, Dr. Fata himself finally spoke on July 10th, 2015 at the day of his sentencing. It was the first time that he had personally addressed the court or his victims since his arrest. Standing before the judge, Fata broke down in tears, saying, quote, I stand before you horribly ashamed of my actions, end quote.
Oh my God. Get fucked.
He admitted that he had succumbed to what he called a, quote, self-destructive quest for power and wealth.
Yeah, okay.
Self-destructive is the word that he used. Self-destructive. Self-destructive.
Self-destructive.
What about everybody fucking else? What about the 553 patients that you overtreated, undertreated, or misdiagnosed to fraudulently bill them?
Self-destructed as you're raking in millions.
Raking in millions. Self-destructed. It's like this, that just shows you what an evil, evil man this is like, he's literally trying to beg for mercy in court. And he's like, I did this. Look at how I've ruined my life. Don't you feel bad for me?
Oh my God.
But he also apologized and said that he hoped one day his victims would forgive him. And I don't want to speak for the victims because everybody has their own healing process. And for some people, forgiveness is very important in that. I just want to say, if it were me, it's a no for me, dog. It's a no for me, dog.
Like the audacity.
The audacity. Literally, that is the audacity of this man of the 94 treatments versus 8 that he should have been given. It's just, he has no...
And then to be like, I hope you can forgive me. No.
Yeah. Literally.
Sorry, but no.
Now, they had actually formed a restitution fund using his seized assets. So there was approximately $11.9 million made available to reimburse former patients for out-of-pocket medical costs related to Fata's treatment. But again, this is just to reimburse them for anything they spent, not for like the insurance companies, like what they spent on top of what their insurance was paying for. So this isn't like going to cover any of the physical or emotional harm that came out of
and
this.
like long-term care.
Yeah, and it's just for what they paid to Dr. Fata.
Oh my God.
So by late 2016, over 500 former patients and families had filed claims for restitution covering expenses like unnecessary chemo bills, medications to treat damage from his interventions, and some did file for funeral costs for loved ones who died under his care. But like I said, there's only $11.9 million. So it is all going first to anything that they paid to Dr. Fata. Now, one federal prosecutor involved noted that simply gathering proof of these expenses was a challenge for many victims. Not only did they have to relive the nightmare, but they had to sift through years of records to prove that they could claim what was owed to them.
Oh my God.
So, like, if you didn't have things going, some of this abuse went back 7 years. If you didn't have proof showing that you paid for this stuff, then you couldn't, like, file for it. You had to have the proof. Now, again, the goal of the fund was not to put a price on pain and suffering. Like, it wasn't to cover things like trauma or lost life, but it was at least to alleviate some of the financial burden that was left in the wake of his fraud. Now, on top of this, though, some of the victims also pursued civil lawsuits against Fata. So a group of 43 victims succeeded in winning a shared settlement of $8 million in a civil case. Unfortunately, those funds got tied up in his other, like, legal snags.
Oh my God.
This is where, if you live in the U.S. and, like, deal with our healthcare system here, and there's no perfect healthcare system, I get that, you're about to get so fucking mad right now. His funds were tied up in other legal snags because the health insurance companies had basically been seeking to recoup the money that they had paid for Fata's unnecessary treatments. So these 43 victims did not get the $8 million that they were owed in this civil suit because his money went to paying back the fucking insurance companies.
Oh my God. I hate it here.
I fucking hate it here, dude. As someone who, by the way, I'm going to put this out there just for anyone who doesn't live in the U.S. I get health insurance through my company, which means my company pays for a portion of my health insurance. I don't have any kids. I don't have a spouse. It's just me on my health insurance. I'm paying for myself. I am now paying $400 a month.
Oh my God.
For health insurance. Actually, I have to sign up by tomorrow for this year. So I was doing a low deductible plan. So I might do the high deductible plan. And in that case, I'll be paying $350 a month instead. I was already paying $320. And $400 a month for one person is crazy.
Highway robbery.
My cousin, she had marketplace insurance because she doesn't get insurance through her employer. She was paying $85 a month because of the Affordable Care Act, which has now been taken away and not replaced.
Yep.
She is now paying $360 a month.
Oh my God.
She went from paying $85 a month to $360 a month.
And now imagine having to pay that when you have a low-paying job or aren't able to work.
Imagine if you have children to be on your insurance and, like, you work a job that doesn't offer it and you're going to the marketplace and it's costing $360. And my cousin's early 30s. She's healthy. She's fit. Yeah. She doesn't have any serious medical issues. Nothing. It's absolute insanity. And I feel bad. A couple of my friends, they have a baby and she stays home with the baby. He's working and his employer offers health insurance. So if you guys don't know, in the U.S., if your employer offers health insurance, you are not allowed to get insurance anywhere else unless it's through your spouse or like a parent or something. Then you can do it through them. But if you don't have a spouse that has health insurance through their employer or parent, and you can only be on your parents till you're 26, you have to get it through your work. So you can't go like price shop, like between insurance companies, which, by the way, I can just tell you why that makes zero fucking sense in a capitalistic for-profit system. But like that's a whole nother fucking 2-hour-long episode that we can get into. So like if someone at my work, there are people that I work with, like they have kids and like they can't go elsewhere. But that's what happened to a friend of mine. Is like they have this baby. They need insurance for all three of them. They have to get it through his work because they're married. Yeah. And they can't afford it. So they just don't have health insurance now for their 1-year-old baby. And it's crazy because It was like, I think she said it was going to cost them $1,200 a month or $1,100 a month. She's like, we can't afford that.
No.
And it's honestly, it's horrific what is happening. Anyway, that's my speech. So yeah. The fact that they're paying the insurance companies back first before these fucking victims, disgusting. Patty Hester, the woman whose story I told you we went into in the beginning, she was a part of that civil suit. And she says she doesn't think she's ever going to see a penny of it. That's her impression of like what's happening. And it's just another layer of injustice to these victims who have been victimized over and over and over and over again by Dr. Fata and now by the legal system and by the insurance companies. And why this is happening, like why it's going to the insurance companies first, I do not understand.
Yeah.
I am assuming there's some sort of legal precedent for it because they actually paid out money. That's why it went to the victims for the actual money that they paid out. Then they're going to the insurance companies for the money that they paid out. But then any type of like civil claims is just ignored, I guess.
Which is crazy because these 43 victims are the ones going to court to fight for this. And the insurance companies get to just sit back and take the money when they did all the work to get the money.
And by the way, the insurance companies, why didn't you guys fucking catch this?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
You didn't catch the one patient who had this medication given to them 94 times when typically it's given 8 times.
And you're the dumbasses that approved that and paid for it.
And
so
I don't understand how these things were getting approved because insurance companies fight tooth and nail to not pay for shit all the time.
Yeah.
And so I don't get it. Now, one positive outcome was for the whistleblowers. So our boy George. He took tremendous personal and professional risk to expose Fata. And because they had like filed that lawsuit before contacting like federal agencies, remember I said he could be financially supported by the government for his acts as a whistleblower. And so my understanding of this whole thing is like if you are a whistleblower and you come to the government saying, I am here to blow whistles, they will financially compensate you for taking a risk, basically, for the greater good of society. That's my understanding of why they do this. So he was rewarded under the False Claims Act. So in early 2016, he received a 6-figure sum as his share of the government's recovery, recognizing the service that he had done. So there are some people that are like angry about this. I could not find where this money came from. Did it come from the government? Or did it come from Dr. Fata's funds? It seemed to me that this was coming from the government.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because of this act, and they do it for other whistleblowers.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but like there are some people who like take issue with the fact that this guy got a payout. I don't necessarily take issue with it. I think this will encourage other people to, I mean, you're risking a lot to do this kind of thing. But I don't know. I would have to sit and really weigh the pros and cons.
But it was because of him that it put a stop to all this, right?
Yeah, 100%. Now, Dr. Mongley, the physician who first uncovered Fata's false diagnoses, he chose not to file any lawsuit or claim a reward. And he stated that doing the right thing was reward enough. And this to me is like, it's kind of a jab at George, it seems. Like they seem like not on the same page about what happened here. And I think that's honorable. I kind of am on the fence of how I feel about George, but I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. I think what he did was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think if it's taking money away from the victims, then that's a tough pill to swallow. But to me, it sounded like it was from the government. I just couldn't find anything to confirm that. But also that is taxpayer dollars, I guess. You could argue some people will be mad about that. I'm cool with that personally in this one instance, but we'll see. So with all of this, a lingering question was whether any of Dr. Fata's actions could be tied directly to patient deaths in a way that might bring additional charges, such as homicide. The U.S. District Attorney's Office noted that they did not have a firm count of how many patients died because of Fata's mistreatment. And proving causation in court would be extremely difficult, especially for these patients who did have cancer.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like any patients that died were ones that they were able to prove never had cancer. So he was giving them just as much as possible without killing them.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me. So they never pursued any like murder or attempted murder because you can't really prove it
Yeah.
in these cases.
Yeah.
So the indictment and conviction focused on fraud and endangerment rather than murder. However, the sentencing judge and investigators made clear that they believe that Fata's practices did contribute to deaths, saying, quote, because of his lies, some of those patients likely died as a result of his actions, end quote. And that was a quote from IRS Special Agent Richard Weber. And you know why I added that quote? It's because Richard Weber, Sloan Memorial, Gray Sloan Memorial.
It's all coming together.
If you know, you know. It's from Grey's Anatomy. If you guys don't watch Grey's Anatomy, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I don't watch it anyway.
Me neither.
Once Christina Yang left, it sucked.
Well, don't give away spoilers to the listeners.
Oh, sorry. You're right. I won't give away spoilers. But like, also, you've had 20 years to watch it. Like, I used to watch in bed with my mom when I was like 12.
Yes.
I'm now watching it back. I'm like, damn, Mom, you let me watch this at 12?
Yeah.
But yeah, go watch Grey's Anatomy. So in any case, Dr. Fata is going to be spending pretty much the rest of his life, for the most part, in prison for what he did.
As he should.
He is currently incarcerated at a federal correctional institution in South Carolina, and his earliest possible release date is the year 2050. And at that point, he would be 85 years old. And look, I never wish any sort of like harm on people or death or anything, even on these horrific fucking people, even on murderers, just because that's not up to me. And I'm not wishing this upon this man. I like genuinely am not, because I think that's a horrible, even on my worst enemy, I wouldn't wish this. But also, like, what if he just got cancer?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that
irony.
just be like ironic? Like he's just in prison and he gets cancer. Like, so I don't know why. Like I was thinking about that when I was writing this. I'm like a fiction. If this was a story of fiction, that's how I would end it.
Yes.
That's how I would end it. Again, not wishing cancer upon this man.
No.
Even though like he kind of does deserve the worst that life has to offer. But like I don't want a role in that. I don't want to put that juju out into the universe. But yeah, if I was writing a book, this is how I would end it. So astonishingly, this guy's not done being a fucking asshole.
Oh no.
So even after pleading guilty and apologizing in court for this self-destructive behavior and begging for forgiveness, Fata later reversed course and proclaimed his innocence. In 2016 and 2017, from prison, Fata began to speak out in media interviews and legal filings to claim that he never actually committed any crimes.
God.
It's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Dude, like, give it up.
He gave a jailhouse interview insisting, quote, I did nothing wrong, end quote, and that his patients who died were, quote, going to die anyhow because of the nature of the diseases, end quote. But he basically is like, let me 180 real quick. Actually, everything I admitted to and begged for forgiveness for, crying in court, I didn't do any of it. And all of these patients needed it. And the only reason that other people are questioning that I made all this up is because it's an aggressive protocol that people aren't used to. But I had medical reasoning for it. That's his claim, is like, no, I really was trying to save these people. Like, I was trying to help them.
But then, like, where is this protocol? Show me the protocol. I want to see who wrote it, where it is.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The spoiler alert, it does not exist. It's not a real thing, the European protocol. And I'm like, that's another thing about all of these nurses and stuff in the clinics is, did you not just Google it?
Yeah.
When you saw all this weird shit happening, did you Google the European protocol? That's where I would have started. I don't know I haven't tried it. I don't know what comes up, but it sounds like it does not exist. But anyway, he's alleging that he pled guilty under duress, is what he's saying, and that prosecutors had political motives against him. So in May of 2018, he formally petitioned to have his guilty plea thrown out, arguing that his attorneys had pressured him into it and that he had maintained his innocence from day one. Besides, apparently, that one day that he admitted to all of it in court and begged for forgiveness. But that's besides the point, apparently. Now, the court did not find any merit in these claims, and they said, yeah, fuck off, your conviction stands. So good job, court. Huzzah to that. To this day, Fata incredibly frames himself as a victim of injustice.
Oh my God.
He has even been working with a group of supporters on a book titled, quote, Convicted Out of Thin Air, The True Story of Dr. Farid Fata, end quote.
So he's still just trying to rake in money.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
Fuck off. And guys, don't buy this motherfucker's book.
No.
Or if you do, release it for free all over the internet so he gets one sale and no one ever has to fucking buy it again. don't give this man money. What do you even need money for in prison? Like, so you can make trades, buy stuff at get cigarettes at the commissary. Can you smoke cigarettes in prison?
I think so. Isn't that a thing?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I watched Orange is the New Black. I might need to run it back.
I thought you were going to say it's been a long time since I've been in prison.
It's been a lifetime, one might say, maybe in a previous life. Now, for the hundreds of people whose lives that he devastated, Fata's refusal to accept responsibility is just another fucking slap in the face. One victim, Geraldine Parkins, said, quote, "To hear that he still will not say I'm guilty, it seems like we're being victimized over and over again," end quote. So that is the end of the story, but I do want to add one thing. The whole time I was reading that, I was waiting for this to come up, and I just assumed I had it somewhere later in the script. But one of the other things that they did was when they're going through these records, they were looking through what he was prescribing for chemotherapy compared to other oncologists for patients with similar conditions. And he was prescribing like 3 to 4 times the amount of chemotherapy as like standard practice.
Oh my God.
And again, this goes back to his whole European protocol thing. He's like, this is the European protocol. It's an aggressive protocol. And I think that's part of kind of what saved him or like kept this going for so long was there are doctors out there who are trying these new treatments that, you know, to help people. They're trying to save people. They're trying to say, look, this is aggressive. This is going to be horrific. But in the end, this is going to give you a better outcome. Sometimes these aren't the standard practice that, you know, they're new, upcoming. I would imagine that these usually start with some sort of like clinical trials before they're just allowed to give it to random people. But it's one of those things that sometimes, you know, doctors do those sorts of things trying to advance medicine and there are bad outcomes. Well, it doesn't work or it has adverse effects that you don't expect or whatever. That is not what happened here, but that's how he was trying to paint it. And I think that's part of how he got away with it for so long. But 3 to 4 times the amount that for the patients who actually had cancer. And I can't imagine. I don't know anyone who did your dad do chemotherapy?
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine him doing it 3 to 4 times?
No.
Like what he did?
Well, and it's crazy because like if you're going to do that and say that it's experimental or you're trying to make an advancement, then you should clarify that instead of marketing it as the standard practice because it's clearly not. So you need to come out and say, hey, this is a more aggressive form, but it's something new that we're trying. Not try to be a fucking liar. And
that's the thing is like, I think that there are other people here that were complicit.
I think so too.
And there is no way that this one man had 7 clinics, a pharmacy, all of this testing equipment, all like pharmacists are working under him. There, all of these nurses. There is no way that he fooled all of these people.
No.
But here's the thing, like go back to George, who was the office manager. He was paying him 6 figures. And I was the office manager for a chiropractor's office years and years ago. I think I got paid $17 an hour when I started there. You know, I was young when I worked there. And it was a small, you know, there were 3 chiropractors there. You know, we had a few hundred patients and whatever, you know, there was only a few of us. This is obviously a much larger job. But like these are not normally, this is not normally a 6-figure position. And so what I suspect, and I don't have any evidence to back this up, this is just a theory, this is not fact, he's likely paying all of these people way more than they could get anywhere else. And so they're letting things slide. I think he's hiding the worst of it. I don't think anyone knew that they were treating patients who literally didn't have cancer.
Or you don't know too, maybe because he is such an asshole, maybe he was threatening, not physically threatening like the nurses and the pharmacists, but maybe he was such an asshole that they were too afraid to come forward or question him.
Oh, 100%. Like, oh, I'll ruin your career.
Yeah, like I don't want to lose my job.
He has this incredible reputation. Well, go against me. You know, this guy who's a multimillionaire who owns this whole thing, has this reputation, has, you know, this fancy education, basically, whatever he did, I can't remember where he did his undergrad, but his residency and all of that at the Memorial Sloan Hospital. It's just like one of those things where you're really going up to bat with someone who can destroy your life. And I think that's why it's like what George did was brave. And it's just so crazy to me that he's done this twice.
Yeah, like
now,
what are the odds?
The sleep clinic, wasn't hurting anybody. It was just monetary. Like, it was just financial fraud. It was the way that they were billing insurance companies. To my understanding, they weren't doing anything to like actually hurt their patients.
Right.
But it's just insane that, like, what are the odds that this happens to this guy twice? And it's like, you picked the wrong motherfucker.
Yeah.
You really did. And I'm curious to know, like, Dr. Fata must not have known about the sleep clinic thing when he hired George, right? You would think if I were George, I'd put that shit on my resume.
Yeah, like I'm a hero, bitch.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah. And I'm just harping now. The other thing is the size of this practice alone should have set off alarm bells for, like, aren't there like medical boards and stuff just keeping an eye on shit?
Yeah.
Because they talked about this in the Dr. Death podcast. I'm going to read this paragraph. This is from my notes. I'm 99% sure this is a verbatim quote from the podcast. So I'm just going to read this to you guys. But they said he had 1,700 active patients at the time of the investigation. Oh, it must not be verbatim because the sentence doesn't make sense. They try to compare his practice to one of similar size, but his patient pool was much larger than any comparable practice. So his practice at the time had one doctor and an estimated 20 to 25 employees at any given time. So they tried to compare his patient pool of 1,700 patients to practices that had the same size staff and same amount of doctors, and they had nowhere near as many patients. So they go up a step. They're looking at practices with, 20-ish doctors or so. Still, he saw way more patients than those practices with 20 or more doctors. So then they start comparing his practice with practices that have 100 or more doctors. And those he finally compared to. So again, like, this is like the Cleveland Clinic oncology department. He is seeing as many people as those. It's just, how are they not catching that?
Yeah.
I just don't fucking understand it. But yeah. That is the horrific story of the evil Dr. Fata.
Yeah, I mean, fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. And I think that's a perfect way to end the episode. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.